My name is Doris, and I am 62 years old. I used to be a school teacher in Connecticut before I retired. Last December, I hosted what I thought would be our traditional Christmas dinner. I had been planning for months, cooking special family recipes passed down through generations. Then something unimaginable happened. My oldest son, Jeffrey, stood up and said words that made my heart stop. I laughed it off and reached for something I had prepared, just in case. The envelope in my pocket would change everything forever. If you are watching this, I would love to know where you are from. Please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and stick around to hear how I turned the most painful moment of my life into my greatest victory. I suppose to understand what happened that Christmas, you need to know about our family first. I was married to Frank for nearly 40 years before he passed away from a heart attack 3 years ago. We built what I thought was a good life together and raised 3 children who I was immensely proud of. Jeffrey is our oldest at 38. He always had a head for numbers, and now he is an investment banker at a prestigious firm in New York City. He married Stephanie, a marketing executive, and they have 2 children, Emma and Jacob. Jeffrey was always the serious one, methodical in everything he did, from organizing his toy cars by color as a child to planning his career path in meticulous detail. Our daughter Amanda is 35 and followed her dream of becoming a surgeon. She works at a hospital in Boston and is married to Paul, who is also a doctor. They have 1 daughter, Lily. Amanda was our determined child, the one who would stay up all night studying for a test to make sure she got the highest grade in class. Our youngest Tyler is 32 and works in the tech industry. He founded a startup in San Francisco with his partner Zach. Tyler was always the creative one, taking apart electronics just to see how they worked, much to Frank's dismay when it came to our household appliances. Frank and I raised them in what I would call a loving but strict household. Education was paramount. We instilled in them the value of hard work and perseverance. I worked as a high school English teacher during the week and did bookkeeping on weekends to help pay for their college funds. Frank worked as an engineering manager, often putting in 60-hour weeks and traveling frequently. He was supportive but often absent due to his demanding career. We saved enough to build a spacious colonial-style home in a nice suburb outside Hartford. It was not lavish by any means, but it was comfortable with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen where I loved to cook, and a backyard where the children played. I thought they appreciated the sacrifices we made, but looking back, I see things differently now. Despite our attempts to teach them humility and gratitude, I began noticing signs of materialistic values developing in them as they entered their teens. Jeffrey became obsessed with designer labels. Amanda would complain when we could not afford to send her to the same summer camps as her wealthier friends. Tyler was constantly asking for the newest video game console or computer. Christmas was always our most cherished family tradition. I would spend weeks decorating every corner of the house, baking cookies from recipes my grandmother taught me, and finding thoughtful gifts that did not break our budget. We would attend midnight service at church, then come home for hot chocolate before bed. Christmas morning was for opening presents, followed by a grand dinner with all the trimmings. The first real cracks in our family foundation appeared after Frank died. He had a massive heart attack while at work, completely unexpected. While I was consumed by grief, losing my partner of 4 decades, my children seemed to move through the funeral arrangements with clinical efficiency. Within days of the service, they were asking about the will, the house, and Frank's life insurance policy. Jeffrey, in particular, seemed more concerned about the status of our investments than my emotional well-being. Amanda asked about family heirlooms before I had even begun to process that Frank was gone. Tyler inquired about selling the house while the funeral flowers were still fresh. I dismissed this as their way of coping with grief, but I was wrong. It was the beginning of the end of the family I thought we had. Over the next 3 years after Frank's death, I watched my children change in ways that broke my heart. Or perhaps they did not change at all, and I simply began to see them clearly for the first time without Frank acting as a buffer between us. Their success in their respective fields seemed to create a growing gulf between us. Each visit home became an exercise in criticism disguised as concern. Amanda would bring expensive bottles of wine to dinner, making comments like, "Mom, you really should upgrade from these grocery store brands. Your palate deserves better." She would rearrange my furniture when she thought I was not looking and suggest different paint colors because my home looked stuck in the 90s. Jeffrey became increasingly insistent that I should sell the family home. "It is too big for one person, Mom," he would say. "Think about the property taxes and maintenance. You could get a nice condo and invest the difference." What he really meant was that my continued ownership of the valuable property was delaying his inheritance. Tyler was physically present during visits, but mentally elsewhere, constantly checking his phone or laptop. Conversations with him became superficial and brief. He would nod and smile without hearing a word I said. When I asked about his life in San Francisco, he would give vague answers, as if speaking to a casual acquaintance rather than his mother. Their partners reinforced these attitudes. Stephanie Jeffrey's wife would inspect my kitchen with barely concealed disapproval. Paul Amanda's husband spoke to me slowly as if my age had diminished my intelligence. Zach Tyler's partner was polite but distant, clearly seeing family gatherings as an obligation rather than a joy. What truly wounded me was their reaction when I decided to volunteer teaching English to immigrants at our community center. I found purpose and connection there after retirement, helping people who were genuinely grateful for my time and knowledge. "Is that safe, Mom?" Amanda asked with a frown. "Those neighborhoods can be rough." Jeffrey was more blunt. "What is the point of working for free? If you need something to do, I could find you a paid consulting position." Tyler simply rolled his eyes. "Classic Mom, always the do-gooder." They seemed embarrassed by my modest Toyota while they arrived in their BMWs, Audis, and Teslas. When my former teaching colleagues would visit my children, would find excuses to be elsewhere, as if my friends were somehow beneath them. The invitations to important events in their lives gradually dwindled. I learned about Emma's piano recital from Facebook photos after the fact. I was not invited to Amanda's hospital department Christmas party, where spouses and family were welcome. Tyler launched a new app and did not think to include me in the celebration. When I did receive invitations, they came with conditions. "Dress nicely, Mom," or "Please do not bring up politics," or "We have told everyone you are a retired professor, not just a high school teacher." Each request chipped away at my dignity until I barely recognized myself in their presence. The final straw was overhearing Amanda on the phone with a friend, describing me as becoming difficult and stuck in her ways. I realized then that in their eyes I had transformed from a parent to be respected into a problem to be managed. The thought made me physically ill. The financial pressure began subtly before escalating into something that felt predatory. Frank had always been careful with money, taking out a substantial life insurance policy and building a decent retirement portfolio. While we were not wealthy by any means, there was enough for me to live comfortably if I was careful. Jeffrey began inquiring about my finances within months of Frank's funeral. "Have you considered diversifying your portfolio, Mom?" he asked during a Sunday visit. "I have some clients who have seen excellent returns on certain investments." What he did not mention was that these investments would generate handsome commissions for his firm. Amanda was less direct, but equally persistent. "The twins' private school tuition is increasing again." She would sigh, though she and Paul earned combined salaries well into the six figures. "We are trying to save for Lily's college fund, too." The implication was clear, though never explicitly stated. My savings could solve their problems. Tyler was the most transparent. "I need some seed money for a new development phase," he said over coffee one day. "The investors are interested, but they want to see some family commitment. I was thinking about 50,000. You would get a return, of course. When I decided to donate $5,000 from my savings to establish a small scholarship fund for the immigrant students I taught, the reaction was swift and unified. Jeffrey called it irresponsible. Amanda suggested I might be developing cognitive issues. Tyler accused me of caring more about strangers than family. I began noticing them exchanging glances when I misplaced my reading glasses or forgot a minor detail in conversation. Any normal sign of aging became documented evidence of my supposed decline. Jeffrey started sending me articles about retirement communities. Amanda offered to help organize my finances. Tyler suggested I give him power of attorney just in case. Then came the family meeting they did not invite me to. It was a Sunday afternoon when they thought I was at church, but service had been canceled due to weather. I came home to find their 3 cars in the driveway and voices coming from the living room. I quietly entered through the kitchen and overheard Jeffrey speaking. "We need to discuss Mom's financial situation," he was saying. "I am worried about her ability to manage on her own. The market is volatile right now, and she could lose everything if she makes bad decisions." "Has she updated her will since Dad died?" Amanda asked. "Everything should be split equally among us, but we should make sure." "The house is the main asset," Tyler added. "If we could convince her to sell now rather than later, we could help her invest it properly." I slipped out before they could discover me, my hands shaking with anger and betrayal. The next day I called Sarah, my closest friend, and a retired attorney who had helped Frank and me with our wills years ago. Over coffee in her kitchen, safely away from my children's prying ears, I told her everything. "This happens more often than you would think," Sarah said sadly. "What do you want to do?" "Doris." "I want to protect myself," I replied. "And honestly, I want to teach them a lesson they will never forget." Together we developed a plan that would safeguard my future and force my children to confront the people they had become. It was drastic, but as Sarah reminded me, these were drastic circumstances. With her legal expertise, we spent the next 2 months quietly putting everything in place. Not once did my children notice anything amiss, so confident were they in their perception of me as naive and declining. As December approached, I began preparing for what I suspected might be the last traditional Christmas in our family home. Despite knowing what might be coming, I wanted everything to be perfect, a final gesture of the maternal love my children had taken for granted. I spent weeks shopping for thoughtful gifts. For Jeffrey, first editions of classic novels he had enjoyed as a teenager before finance consumed his personality. For Amanda, a hand-knit sweater and a photo album of her childhood accomplishments. For Tyler, vintage tech memorabilia from the brands he had admired growing up. For the grandchildren, carefully selected toys and books that I hoped would foster creativity rather than materialism. The kitchen became my sanctuary as I prepared all their favorite dishes. Jeffrey's beloved beef Wellington that took days to perfect, Amanda's favorite cranberry orange scones, and chocolate mousse. Tyler's requested spiced apple cider and pecan pie, foods that held memories of happier times when their eyes would light up with simple joy at the taste of something made with love. I decorated the house as I always had with the ornaments the children had made in school, the star topper Frank had bought our first Christmas together, and the nutcracker collection we had built over decades. Each item had a story, a memory attached. I wondered if they even remembered these stories anymore, or if they had been replaced by brand names and status symbols in their minds. In the week before Christmas, the phone calls began, strange, tense conversations with each of my children. Jeffrey called first. "Mom, we are all planning to come for Christmas dinner as usual," he said, his voice oddly formal. "There are some important family matters we need to discuss." "Is everything okay?" I asked, though I knew it was not. "Just some things that cannot wait any longer," he replied evasively. Amanda called the next day with unusual questions. Will you be serving dinner in the formal dining room? Will the grandchildren eat separately? Who else will be there? She never asked these things normally, and her tone suggested she was planning something. Tyler's call was the briefest. We will all be there on Christmas. Jeffrey said there is something important to discuss. He sounded uncomfortable, and I wondered if he was truly on board with whatever plan they had concocted. I could not help but contrast their coldness with the excitement of my grandchildren during their calls. Emma chattered about the Christmas list she had sent to Santa. Jacob wanted to know if I would make my special hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Lily asked if we could bake cookies together like last year. Their innocence made what was coming all the more painful. With Sarah's help, I prepared 3 identical envelopes containing the documents that would change everything. She reviewed every detail to ensure everything was legally sound. Are you absolutely sure about this, Doris? Sarah asked as we sealed the last envelope. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. Christmas Day arrived with a fresh dusting of snow, making the house look like something from a holiday card. The first to arrive were Jeffrey and Stephanie, with their children bringing expensive wines and store-bought desserts. Amanda and Paul came next with Lily and multiple packages wrapped in designer paper. Tyler and Zach arrived last, apologizing for their tardiness, while Tyler finished a business call in the driveway. The initial atmosphere seemed pleasant enough, though I detected an undercurrent of tension. The grandchildren's genuine joy provided a welcome counterpoint to their parents' forced smiles and stilted conversation. I noticed Jeffrey taking subtle stock of items in the house, his eyes lingering on artwork and antiques, as if mentally appraising them. Amanda made a pointed remark about my appearance, suggesting my hairstyle was aging me unnecessarily. Tyler took 3 business calls within the first hour, stepping outside each time with muffled apologies. As I bustled around the kitchen, putting final touches on dinner, I felt a strange calm descend. Whatever happened next, I was prepared. The envelopes sat in my cardigan pocket, waiting for their moment. The dining room looked beautiful, if I do say so myself. The table was set with my best china crystal glasses, reflecting the light from the chandelier, and the sterling silver flatware Frank and I had received as a wedding gift 40 years earlier. The centerpiece featured fresh pine branches, red candles, and the porcelain angels my mother had given me before she passed. I had arranged the seating carefully. Jeffrey at one end of the table where Frank used to sit, a position he had subtly claimed over recent gatherings. I took my usual place at the opposite end. Amanda and Paul sat to my right, Tyler and Zach to my left. The grandchildren had their own table nearby, decorated with festive placemats and smaller versions of the table settings. The food came out in stages. First the appetizers, crab cakes and stuffed mushrooms, then the garden salad with homemade vinaigrette. The main course followed a golden brown turkey with all the trimmings, sides of creamy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, sweet potato with marshmallows, cranberry sauce made from scratch, and warm rolls with honey butter. The conversation remained awkward. Surface-level discussions about weather traffic on the drive over and vague mentions of work achievements. No one asked about my life or my English students. No one commented on the food beyond perfunctory compliments. The children kept exchanging glances, apparently waiting for the right moment. It came during dessert. I had just served the pumpkin and pecan pies with fresh whipped cream when Jeffrey clinked his glass with his spoon. The sound rang out like a gunshot in the tense silence that immediately fell. Jeffrey stood straightening his designer tie and cleared his throat. His face took on the same expression he used for business presentations. "Mom," he began, his voice steady and rehearsed. "We, the children, have decided that you are no longer a member of our family." The words hung in the air like poison. Emma dropped her fork with a clatter. Lily's eyes went wide with confusion. Jacob looked back and forth between his father and me. Amanda jumped in with clinical precision before I could respond. "We have been concerned about your decision-making for some time now," she said. "Your choice to volunteer in dangerous neighborhoods, Your refusal to consider appropriate living arrangements for someone your age, your financial decisions that show questionable judgment. We think it would be best if you agree to assisted living, Jeffrey continued. We have found a very nice facility in Hartford. They have an opening next month. We would handle selling the house, of course. Tyler finally spoke, though he kept his eyes fixed on his plate. And managing your finances. It is for the best, Mom. Their spouses sat in uncomfortable silence. Paul studied his wineglass intensely. Stephanie adjusted her napkin repeatedly. Zach looked as though he wished to be anywhere else. In the terrible silence that followed, I felt 40 years of motherhood flash before my eyes. The sleepless nights with colicky babies, teaching them to read and tie their shoes, bandaging skinned knees and mending broken hearts, working extra jobs to afford college tuitions, always putting them first, Frank and me both. And then, to my own surprise, I laughed. Not a bitter laugh or an hysterical one. A genuine laugh of someone who finally sees the truth with perfect clarity. Is that so? I said, reaching into my cardigan pocket for the 3 identical envelopes I had prepared. My hands were steady, my voice calm. Here is my parting gift for you all. I stood and walked around the table, placing an envelope in front of each of my children. Please open them now, I insist. They exchanged confused glances, clearly thrown off script by my lack of tears or protests. Hesitantly, they opened the envelopes and began to read the documents inside. The room fell into a silence so profound I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. Their faces transformed as they read, moving from confusion to disbelief to shock, and finally, to something approaching horror. Jeffrey found his voice, first his face flushing red. You sold the house? He nearly screamed, waving the document in the air. Without telling any of us, this has to be a joke. Amanda was rapidly flipping through the pages, her surgeon's hands trembling. A scholarship fund for immigrants, half the proceeds. Have you lost your mind completely? Her voice rose to a pitch I had never heard from her before. Tyler stared at the documents, then at me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, he managed to sputter. Arizona. You bought a house in Arizona without consulting us. The legal documents in their hands were quite clear. With Sarah's expert guidance, I had indeed sold the family home a month earlier, to a lovely young family who appreciated its history and character. I had divided the substantial proceeds exactly as stated, half going to establish a permanent scholarship fund for immigrant students pursuing education named in honor of Frank. The other half I had used to purchase a comfortable single-level home in a retirement community in Sedona, Arizona, where Sarah's sister lived. But the detail that seemed to horrify them most was the revised will stipulating that my remaining assets would go to charities supporting education for underprivileged students, with only token inheritances for each of them. The personal letter I had included explained my disappointment in their values and behavior, how I had watched them transform from the loving children I raised into materialistic adults who saw me as an asset rather than a mother. How this decision was not made in anger, but in sad recognition of what they truly valued from me. Their reactions escalated quickly from shock to outrage. Amanda dramatically tore her documents in half, the pieces fluttering to the dining room floor. You cannot do this. We will contest it legally. You are clearly not in your right mind. Jeffrey was already on his phone, presumably calling his lawyer. This will never stand up in court. Never. We will have you evaluated for competency immediately. Tyler stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. This is insane. I cannot believe you would do this to your own children. He stormed out of the dining room, Zach following with an apologetic glance back at me. The grandchildren were watching, wide-eyed, witnessing the true nature of their parents for perhaps the first time. Emma was crying quietly. Jacob looked bewildered. Lily clung to Paul's arm, frightened by her mother's uncharacteristic loss of control. I remained standing, my posture straight, my voice steady when I finally spoke. The documents are all legal and binding. The house closing was completed weeks ago. The new owners take possession on January 15th. My flight to Arizona leaves the next day. You planned this all along, Jeffrey accused, his voice shaking with rage. This whole dinner was a setup. No, I corrected him. This dinner was one last attempt to see if there was anything of my real children left in you. I see now there is not. How dare you judge us? Amanda hissed. After all, we have accomplished all we have done for you. This finally broke through my calm. Done for me? I asked incredulously. What exactly have you done for me since your father died, except criticize my choices, dismiss my interests, and plot to control my assets? When did you last ask about my happiness, my dreams for my remaining years? When did any of you last treat me as a person rather than a problem to solve, or an inheritance to protect? The silence that followed was damning. Not one of them could meet my eyes. I think it is time for you all to leave, I said quietly but firmly. Take your things and go. I have a lot to do before the moving trucks arrive. This is not over, Jeffrey threatened as he gathered his coat and car keys. Actually, it is, I replied. Completely and irrevocably over. They left in a chaos of slammed doors and squealing tires, taking their stunned spouses and confused children with them. The grandchildren's tearful goodbyes broke my heart, but I knew I would find a way to maintain those relationships separately from their parents. Standing alone in the suddenly silent house, surrounded by half-eaten desserts and torn legal documents, I felt an overwhelming mix of grief and liberation. The family I thought I had was gone, but in its place was the truth. And truth, however painful, was preferable to comforting illusions. The months following that Christmas dinner were among the most difficult and ultimately rewarding of my life. After 40 years in Connecticut, packing up the house was emotionally exhausting. Each item held memories both good and painful. Sarah helped me through it, spending weekends sorting and packing, listening, when I needed to talk, sitting in silence, when words failed me. True to Jeffrey's threat, I received formal legal letters challenging the house sale and my revised will on grounds of diminished capacity. Sarah connected me with an excellent elder law attorney who quickly put those challenges to rest with medical evaluations, confirming my complete competence. The legal threats eventually subsided, as their lawyers undoubtedly advised them of the futility. Moving to Arizona was terrifying and exhilarating. I had never lived outside New England, and the desert landscape initially felt alien. My new home in Sedona was smaller but perfect for my needs, a 2-bedroom Pueblo-style house with a covered patio overlooking breathtaking red rock formations. The retirement community welcomed me warmly. My neighbors, mostly other transplants from colder climates, invited me to book clubs, hiking groups, and community dinners. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who valued me for my companionship rather than what I could provide them. Within a month, I found a community center serving the local Hispanic population and volunteered to teach English classes 3 mornings a week. My students ranged from young mothers to elderly men, all dedicated to learning and profoundly grateful for the help. Their genuine appreciation was balm for my wounded heart. I made new friends who knew nothing of my past life or family drama. Patricia, a retired librarian from Chicago. James and Michael, a couple who had run a restaurant in Seattle before retiring. Eleanor, a widow like me who had moved from Florida to be closer to the mountains she loved. We formed a close-knit group, sharing meals, taking day trips, and supporting each other through the challenges of aging. For 6 long months, I heard nothing from my children. No calls, no emails, no cards. I sent birthday gifts to the grandchildren with notes explaining that I loved them and always would, Regardless of adult disagreements, they were too young to understand. I never knew if these gifts were received or discarded. Then one afternoon in June, my phone rang with a California area code. Tyler's voice sounded hesitant when I answered. "Mom, it is Tyler. I was wondering how you were doing." Our conversation was awkward but civil. He asked about Arizona, I asked about his work. Neither of us mentioned Christmas or the legal documents. When he suggested visiting sometime, maybe in the fall, I cautiously agreed. Tyler and Zach did visit in October. The tension was palpable at first, but gradually eased as we carefully navigated safe topics. On their last evening sitting on my patio watching the sunset paint the red rocks gold, Tyler finally broached the subject. "I owe you an apology, Mom," he said quietly. "I got caught up in Jeffrey and Amanda's plan. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it. I am sorry." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did all of you turn against me like that?" Tyler was silent for a long moment. "Money," he finally admitted. "But also control. Jeffrey especially could not handle you making independent decisions. We all got used to seeing Dad as the decision maker and you as the supporter. When you started making choices we did not approve of, it felt like you were breaking some unspoken rule." It was not a complete explanation, but it was a start. When they left, Tyler hugged me for the first time in years, a real embrace, rather than the perfunctory gesture he had offered in recent visits. We established a tentative new relationship based on who we were now rather than who we had been. Amanda maintained her silence for another 3 months before allowing me to have video calls with Lily. Our conversations remained strained and focused solely on my granddaughter, but it was a small opening in the wall between us. Jeffrey held out the longest maintaining complete silence until his own life began to unravel. Stephanie filed for divorce, citing his workaholism and emotional unavailability, the very qualities he had cultivated in pursuit of financial success. In the midst of this personal crisis, he called me late one night, his voice breaking. "I messed everything up," he said without preamble. "My marriage, my relationship with my children, with you." "Yes, you did." I agreed not unkindly, but nothing is permanently broken unless you choose not to repair it. Our reconciliation has been the slowest and most tentative. The damage he inflicted, and the cruel words spoken that Christmas cannot be easily undone. But we are trying one careful conversation at a time. The Scholarship Fund for Immigrant Students has now helped 8 people pursue higher education or vocational training. I receive letters from them describing their progress, their dreams, their gratitude. These letters bring me more joy than all the material possessions I left behind in Connecticut. Last Christmas, 1 year after the confrontation that ended one phase of my life, I hosted a different kind of gathering. Tyler and Zach came bringing thoughtful, modest gifts. Amanda sent Lily with Paul a peace offering of sorts. Jeffrey came alone, still learning how to exist outside his former life. Sarah flew in from Connecticut, and my Arizona friends joined us for a potluck dinner where everyone contributed something meaningful. It was not perfect. The conversation sometimes stalled, old hurts occasionally surfaced, but it was real, in a way my family had not been for many years. I have learned that family is not defined by blood or obligation. True family are the people who see you clearly and love you anyway, who value your presence more than your possessions, who respect your autonomy even when they disagree with your choices. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought was important to find what truly is. Standing your ground is not selfish. Saying no to toxic relationships is not cruel. Demanding respect is not asking too much. I would like to know if any of you have faced similar situations with family members who seem to value inheritance over relationship. How did you handle it? Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family dynamics? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If you found my story meaningful, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to set boundaries, even with family. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most authentic lives. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that may be. And remember, it is never too late to create a life filled with genuine connection and respect.